India is a juggernaut that you cannot contain in a box. India must find its true place with its energies, whether it's in the sea lane, whether it's in space, whether it's strategically. All the S's matter to us.
Yeah.
But it also matters to us to be seen as a partner and not as an ally.
Okay.
Because to quote Stephen Cohen, that India is a friend but not an ally. But Pakistan's an ally and not a friend.
But some undercurrents which we are missing out, Maruf. Because Modi spoke about the division of Europe. Wasn't that an indirect reference to Russia and Ukraine? Yeah. Modi spoke about undercurrents, very important, significant. Ron refers to it. He spoke about maritime security in the Asia-Pacific region. Wasn't that a reiteration of the veiled attack he made against China when he was in Japan 3 weeks back? Siddharth?
I think 2-3 things which we must understand or highlight. India is a country where Mangalyam has moved in 1/5 of the cost to where the world has done to Mars. So I think India as a technology, as scientists, we are there to offer to USA or anywhere else. Second is, we all understand there are 3 sea lanes which goes into China.
Yeah.
Now, America has been looking at maritime security for some time, and they want a position on the Indo-Pacific region.
Yeah.
Now that can be, but again, for India and Russia, India and USA needs to understand, or US needs to make India understand that it is not certainly against China.
Yes.
So because we are developing a relationship with China, and let me also say that cyber security, along with maritime security, along with social security, and also on the manufacturing, which we have been referring on the defense side, I think it is becoming more and more important, and particularly a message to America that, look, we are not here just to take a TOT and you hold back to your critical softwares or something. To give an example, Javelin is a great. You are holding on to the Seeker's software, which is the core of the guidance missile. You don't offer to us, where are we going? The private companies can come, but you as a US government will hold on to it, then that TOT is of no worth.
Yeah.
So it's a very transparent, very clear message to everybody, and particularly before the meeting happens with Mr. Obama. Certainly, this Indo-US strategic alliance will go into a next stage, and it will go as one-to-one. Nothing that India has come for an aid.
I strongly agree with the very important points which you made out there. Because, after this, of course, we are going to the bilateral in Washington. If Washington is smart, now I preface that by saying that, Siddharth, unless Washington still has preconceived notions about India, if the White House is going to be smart about it, they will read the very clear points. Modi is not a politician who gets his words wrong, even when he's speaking extempore. When he wants to send out the right messages, he's sending out the messages. And in this case, he makes 4 clear messages. One, he says we want a reformed UN Security Council, which means we want to be part of the global security elite. Then he speaks about maritime security, exactly the kind of line that Obama and the Americans would agree with. He speaks about the division of Europe. Seems to me to be an indirect reference to Russia and Ukraine. But he also spoke about terrorism in West Asia. Ron, without directly referring to the ISIS, I thought if there is one point which Mr. Modi could have included, it could have been ISIS. He doesn't directly refer to ISIS. He speaks about terrorism in Africa, which reels from the havoc, created by the likes of Boko Haram in Nigeria and the Al-Shabaab in Somalia. So overall, I find this a uniquely global focus.
Absolutely.
In Modi's speech.
Arnab, if I could just comment.
Uniquely global focus this time.
When you see the sequence of his engagement with Nepal, followed by his engagement with Prime Minister Abe in Japan.
Yes.
And then the recent meetings with Mr. Xi up in Ahmedabad and New Delhi. And yes, the Chinese are causing the incursions up in Ladakh as well as in Arunachal Pradesh, a very real irritant. I think he comes to the United States appreciating and having the Americans now appreciate that this is our moment to forge this strategic partnership.
Yes,
respecting one another, transferring technology, and building building up our capabilities together as the largest free market democracies on this earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Without looking defensive vis-a-vis Pakistan. Pawan Verma, sorry to keep you waiting. One of India's most forthright former diplomats and now a member of parliament. Pawan Verma, how did you read the speech?
First of all, Arnab, let me say that it was a statesman-like speech. I want to reiterate the point that all prime ministers who have addressed the UN General Assembly speak not from the point of India merely as a country. They speak of India as a 5,000-year-old civilization, the world's largest democracy, 1/6 of mankind. And so it's a larger message they conveyed, and Mr. Modi, I think, continued that tradition. If you were to pick up the speech of Atal Bihari Vajpayee or of Rajiv Gandhi, you would see that we take the higher stand, because that rostrum is to articulate a series of noble thoughts which can be of relevance to mankind. So in that way, it was a continuation of tradition. Secondly, I'm very happy personally that he spoke in Hindi. Thirdly, there are 3 points I want to make where I give his speech high marks. Firstly, I think that the manner in which, and you have discussed this among your panelists, he discussed with Pakistan is precisely the right approach. For Pakistan, their foreign policy may be India-centric. But for India, certainly, speaking from what India is, our policies and our speeches at the UN General Assembly cannot be Pakistan-centric. And the manner in which he therefore dealt after Nawaz Sharif had spoken with Pakistan was the right approach to take, to say that India would like to have a dialogue, is willing to have it provided the right conditions are met by Pakistan, which I think conveys it all. Secondly, I think his formulation on the reform of the UN Security Council was very good. For a long time, Arnab, I believed that for a country like India to go about with some kind of multilateral begging bowl seeking a place for India on the Security Council is unwarranted, it's unnecessary, it's also at some point humiliating. India rightly deserves to be there. The reform of the Security Council is imperative, is far too delayed. And Mr. Modi saying, not talking about India, but saying that the United Nations Security Council must be relevant today, and relevance means reform which is congruent with the changes that have taken place in the world. This is important, and the manner in which he put it, and I hope that this is the kind of policy that will guide India in the future, because I can assure you that the vested interests who are there will tangle this whole question in a procedural web whereby India will continue to persevere, and unless the UN itself takes a bigger view in the picture, will never find its rightful place where it needs to be. Thirdly, I think his stress on counterterrorism was important. We are victims of terrorism. He spoke in the specific context of West Asia, and his emphasis that the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism should be signed is, I think, the right signal, especially from a country like India. Now, this being said, there were other aspects of his speech which I put in the category of noble platitudes which should be made, but which are not necessarily exceptionally substantive. For instance, his statement about the world becoming G1. The fact of the matter is the reality of the world is divided among the haves, the have-nots, the developed world, the developing world. There are many fault lines. There are positions that need to be taken depending on where you are. Where you stand depends on where you sit. And those are dialogues which cannot be overarched by a noble expression of unity. But nevertheless, the UN rostrum is precisely the area from where you can try and make it. But I think it needs to be put in context. Fourthly, for instance, his civilizational element from India, talking of an international yoga day, etc. These are all part of the minutiae. But the central point of his speech was, it was short, it was on to the point, and I think he spoke in the right way on Pakistan, on a Security Council reform, and on terrorism.
Well, I think, and may I say this, that is rich praise coming from Pawan Verma, who, by the way, Ron, besides being an experienced diplomat, is not nowhere close to Mr. Modi politically. He represents a party which is fighting an intense battle with the BJP in his home state of Bihar. So, but I'm glad that you've made these points, you know, with a rare amount of candor. And I think Sudhindra Kulkarni, and I think we would agree here, Sudhindra Kulkarni smiling there. I think what our country needs to see on the issue of foreign policy now is a coming together among political parties on these issues. You know, that is where, you know, you look at the United States of America, and that is one of the great lessons that we can take from them, that you can have lots of differences. But when you speak in Congress, when you speak in Senate, but when you go to the world, then you present a united face. At no point of time would any American political leader embarrass Barack Obama by, for example, questioning, you know, in international forums or after international speeches, their position on ISIS or their engagement in Iraq or their engagement in Afghanistan. Though many of us in India have very strong reservations on the same. Sudhindra Kulkarni, I think that's to be welcome. What do you think, Sudhindra Kulkarni? I don't know. Sanjay Jha is going to be joining the panel in some time. I hope this spirit of consensus stays when Sanjay Jha joins the panel and the Congress party is there. But I'm not sure about it, Sudhindra Kulkarni, but I'd welcome it.
You know, I was very happy to hear Pawan Vermaji's comments, because it shows that we are a multi-party democracy, but when it comes to international affairs, India's position on the big issues confronting the world, we have one voice. And today our Prime Minister, as I mentioned earlier, he really spoke for the world. He did not speak only for India. The speech had a global focus. You know, I would also like to bring into this debate some other points that he made. You know, in India, he's been trying to make governance development focused. But even today's speech, there was a very strong focus on global development. For example, 2.5 billion people in the world deprived of basic sanitation. Billions of people deprived of electricity, clean drinking water. These are the real issues before the world, which the world has to, the international community, the United Nations, has to overcome. And therefore his call for collective action is something that really resonates with the people around the world, for which we all have to be very happy that the Prime Minister articulated India's position. But there is one more point I would like to make, Arnab. You see, you know, today the world is truly multipolar, and India is emerging as a major pole of the multipolar world order. And therefore, if we want to play a bigger role in the world, we have to solve our own, you know, long pending issues in our neighborhood, especially Pakistan. And therefore, let's not talk of snubbing Pakistan, reducing Pakistan to insignificance, etc., etc. This language does not really help resolve the issue with Pakistan. You know, India today has to play the role of an elder brother.
But there is
get over the problem.
There is no air. I assure you, Mr. Kulkarni.
Let me complete.
Mr. Kulkarni,
if India
Mr. Kulkarni, since I'm on the other side of the world tonight from you,
India's stature in the world will go
but let me assure you, let me assure you, Mr. Kulkarni, 1 minute. First of all, Mr. Kulkarni, I have tremendous regard. Sir, I have tremendous regard for your intellectual honesty on issues of these of international diplomacy and your erudition. I can like to assure you, in our studios in New York, there is neither recrimination nor an atmosphere of bitterness. In fact, I would agree with you that the emphasis in Narendra Modi's speech on simple matters that have a global resonance, when he speaks about sanitation, when he speaks about electricity, when he speaks about drinking water, problems that afflict hundreds of millions of people in India, problems which afflict 2/3 of the developed world, of the developing world, and by steering the focus away from politics, I would actually say here that Narendra Modi distinguished himself, and therefore he distinguished India when he spoke about those issues. You know, it's a statesman-like approach rather than that narrow and insular approach that the likes of Nawaz Sharif adopted yesterday. I think that's actually quite welcome. Yes, please, Siddharth.
2 quick points.
Yes.
One, certainly it's praiseworthy, Mr. Pawan Verma. And I think all the politicians, Congress leaders have been also here for the last 2-3 days. And I've interacted on public forums also. They all have praised and they have said that we will not criticize Mr. Modi as a political adversary. It's not our job. We are looking at the Indian Prime Minister to achieve something great for India in a relationship. I think two quick points. One, I think Mr. Modi has, in his speech, referred to heritage and culture of India by referring to yoga and yoga giving a global solution. I think that's a very important point. But he has raised it that India has a culture, India has a certain...
Gentlemen,
and secondly,
quick.
Secondly, if you may allow, just a small point.
All right.
I think what Mr. Modi has done, not only for the bilateral and multilateral relationship, he has very well emphasized, articulated that in all these relationships, there shouldn't be any big bang announcement. We must put content in the relationship.
Yes. Now, as I welcome our guests from Pakistan, and joining us, our first guest from Pakistan is Air Marshal Abid Rao. But before I go to Air Marshal Abid Rao, who is joining us from Karachi, I would like to play a small clip of Narendra Modi's speech, particularly the part which we call a snub. Now, you can call it a snub, you can call it putting in place, you can call it putting the ball in the other court, you can call it giving wisdom to the Pakistanis. Tariq Azeem from Islamabad is also joining us. I'm going to run that small clip right now. Narendra Modi, when he speaks, short, 4 crisp lines in response to the 18 lengthy pieces of rhetoric that Nawaz Sharif put out yesterday. Here's the clip, then we begin the debate.
भारत अपनी प्रगति के लिए एक शांतिपूर्ण और स्थिर अंतर्राष्ट्रीय वातावरण की अपेक्षा करता है। हमारा भविष्य हमारे पड़ोस से जुड़ा हुआ है। इसी कारण मेरी सरकार ने पहले ही दिन से पड़ोसी देशों से मित्रता और सहयोग बढ़ाने पर पूरी प्राथमिकता दी है और पाकिस्तान के प्रति भी मेरी यही नीति है। मैं पाकिस्तान से मित्रता और सहयोग बढ़ाने के लिए पूरी गंभीरता से शांतिपूर्ण वातावरण में बिना आतंक के साये के साथ द्विपक्षीय वार्ता करना चाहता हूं, लेकिन पाकिस्तान का भी यह दायित्व है कि उपयुक्त वातावरण बनाए और गंभीरता से द्विपक्षीय बातचीत के लिए सामने आए और इस मंच पर बात उठाने से समाधान के प्रयास कितने सफल होंगे, इस पर कईयों को शक है। आज हमें बाढ़ से पीड़ित कश्मीर के लोगों को सहायता देने पर ध्यान देना चाहिए, जो हमने भारत में बड़े पैमाने पर आयोजित किया है और इसके लिए सिर्फ भारत में कश्मीर उसी का ख्याल रखने पर हम रुके नहीं हैं। हमने पाकिस्तान को भी कहा, क्योंकि उस क्षेत्र में भी बाढ़ का असर था। हमने उनको भी कहा कि हम जिस प्रकार से कश्मीर में बाढ़ पीड़ितों की सेवा कर रहे हैं, हम पाकिस्तान में भी उन बाढ़ पीड़ितों की सेवा करने के लिए हमने सामने से प्रस्ताव रखा था। हम विकासशील विश्व का हिस्सा हैं, लेकिन हम अपने सीमित संसाधनों को उन सभी के साथ साझा करने के इच्छुक हैं जिन्हें इनकी नितांत आवश्यकता है।
Okay. Tariq Azeem from Islamabad, Brajesh Kalappa of the Congress Party joining us from New Delhi, and Air Marshal Abid Rao from Karachi. Tariq Azeem, good evening. You know,
good evening
what
to you,
happened ended up being a big flop show for Mr. Nawaz Sharif, who went and stomped his feet about in the international community, and in response, Narendra Modi simply says, I will talk to you when you create the right environment. Full stop. That's it. You went to the international community in a typical, and if I may say so, a predictable tone, asking for third-party intervention. Modi asks you to look at the Kashmir issue as a humane issue where people are involved and not just as boundaries and masses of land, when he says that there are floods and we should address that together rather than anyone else. I mean, he's really taken the rug under your feet. What are you going to do now, Mr. Azim?
Mr. Goswami, if you allow me to talk today, let me first say I will ignore your rhetoric and go into substance. What he said, first of all, let me welcome what Mr. Modi has said, that he is ready to engage Pakistan. But that has to be shown to be real. In the past, the belligerent attitude adopted by India has always derailed the talks. What happened recently? The Foreign Secretary, that talks that were going to happen on the 25th of August were called off on the 18th of August, 7 days before. Why? Because our High Commissioner Basit was going to meet Hurriyat leaders from Kashmir. He was told, you meet them, have a talks with them, or have a talk with us.
That's all a matter of a matter of the past now, because Modi has said, I'll talk to you, but only when you create the right.
So I mean, depends the atmosphere for talks have to be created from both sides, Mr. Arnab Goswami. You know that. It doesn't work only on one side. You have to also create the right atmosphere for talks. When Mr. Nawaz Sharif went to India and the inauguration of Mr. Modi, everybody thought that we were on the right track. But unfortunately, like what was said today, I mean, when I saw the statement issued by the Indian delegation that we have democratic process allowed in Jammu and Kashmir, and people have chosen democratically to live in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Well, what do you expect them to do? Do you expect them to leave Jammu and Kashmir? They have every right to stay in their own state. They will not going to go anywhere. All they want is Indian forces to go away from there so they can have the right to plebiscite. What is it wrong with that? This was the right of the people as determined by the United Nations.
If I may,
you're not going to talk to us.
If I may observe,
please let me finish. Please let me finish.
Mr. Azim,
let me finish, please.
Mr. Azim, if I may,
let me finish, please.
If I may just make a small observation.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
So you are looking a little hassled by Narendra Modi's speech. Is Pakistan a little hassled by Narendra Modi's speech?
No, yes. Well, I mean, when he says that he is ready to engage with Pakistan, with that part of the speech, I think is very welcomed in Pakistan. That's what we want. We want to resolve this issue amicably through talks. We have always said we are prepared to engage with you, and you have to also adopt the same attitude. But a belligerent attitude on your part, which has bedeviled our talks in the past, will not do. But please don't put blames on us. If we cannot talk to you, we have to take it to the right forum. And the most appropriate forum is the United Nations.
Okay, sir. No, sir. Sir, I understand what you're saying. Now, our participants in New York would like to respond to you, Mr. Azim, and Marshal Rao, I'll come to you. But if I can just be permitted, to turn the clock back 48 hours or so. When I landed in New York, the conversation this time about 48 hours back, Maruf, we were talking about it right here in Times Square. And we said, what is Pakistan trying to do? Pakistan is going to try and make India the villain in the suspension of calling off of the talks. And that was the whole strategy behind Sartaj Aziz's initial comment. Now, what I feel, and you may like to respond to our Pakistani interlocutors today, that Modi did not drag bilateral issues onto the world stage in a way that is bitter, and only with an attempt to bicker. So not bitter, won't bicker. He simply says we walk the talk, we want to walk the talk only and only when you create the right atmosphere, free from terror, and one that is taken forward with a sense of responsibility. That's why I asked our Pakistani interlocutors whether they were a little more hassled with Modi's speech, because it's not the kind of defensive approach we saw from Manmohan Singh in the past,
Well, I think he's caught a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah.
Barring aside the odd optimist like myself, who from the very beginning believed that you have two choices.
You think he's caught the Pakistanis by surprise?
I think to some extent, because my view was that you are standing at a fork. It is something that Mr. Haqqani also referred to yesterday, that you could either choose to move forward in a global direction, or you could choose to continue to get stuck onto your basic issue on which Pakistan keeps raising the ante and we keep responding, and you can get stuck on it. I think it's very clear India's position on that. But I think I'd like to ask my Pakistani guests, both of them, I've asked many of them earlier, that we keep saying, let's talk, let's solve the Kashmir issue. Could you define, in your understanding of things, and I think it will reflect the establishment's view, that what is solve Kashmir? Is it to take the valley away from India? Is it to accept the line of control as a border? Or is it to give independence to the Kashmiris?
You ask this question all the time, you get no clear answer,
no,
Maruf.
if we get a clear answer, then at least we have a direction then to turn around and say, no, that's not acceptable to us, so we couldn't be talking about it. Could we have it from you, sir, because you're wise men from Pakistan?
Tariq Azim, I think, wants to respond, and I'll let Marshal Rao also come in after that.
Very clear answer, Maruf. Maruf, very clear answer. Either we sit down and decide the things between us, but one thing I must let you know and your viewers know, that any bilateral agreement does not override a resolution of the Supreme Court, of the United Nations Security Council. That is an internationally accepted principle. So we are prepared to sit and talk if we can settle the matter as per the resolution of 1948, which gives the right of the people.
All right, sir. I think Siddharth also wants to respond to you, sir.
Don't laugh. You cannot laugh it away. You cannot laugh it away.
The UN resolution is something which has become in Urdu. Sir, please hear me out. Sir, with respect, sir, Mr. Azim, sir. In Urdu, जिसे कहते हैं तकिया कलाम,